by the regional leaders in that region. A piece of House Bill 277 was to set up a commission on transit governance. Now we all have watched as we're all particularly interested in the metro area. And in the metro area, the 10 counties came together, argued, wrangled, compromised, and came up with a list of projects that will be the basis for what we vote on July 31st. The other thing that they did is they looked at how to bring these counties together to create a regional governance system. You know, we have a lot of transit in our area, certainly not enough, but we have MARTA, we have Cobb County Transit, we have Gwinnett Transit, and we have GRITA. And they believed, all these county commissioners and city mayors believed that we needed to coordinate those transit systems to make the Transportation Investment Act work not just for roads, but also for transit, which includes trains, buses, whatever else they can come up with in the future. So this group also came together, and these are local elected officials, commissioners and mayors came together and came up with a structure for a regional transit authority. What they called the one in the metro region was called the MTA, the Metro Transit Authority. We believe that the Metro Transit Authority structure being in place is an integral part of being able to pass the Transportation Investment Act. Why do we think it's so important? Part of the reason is that the decisions will be made by local elected officials. So the money is collected in the region. It's going to be used for projects, roads, and transit in the region. And the transit part of the dollars need to be determined and controlled by regional leaders, these local leaders who got together, spent lots of hours arguing, but came up with a plan that they all agreed upon. Now that's pretty remarkable to think about 10 county commissioners getting together and being able to come up with a plan that they could all agree upon. House Bill 1200 sets up this authority that I've described, including a Metro Transit Authority of the 10 counties. It balances the population and the amount of investment in transit to come up with a scheme to make an authority that can contract with MARTA. It can contract with Cobb County Transit. It can contract with Gwinnett County Transit or any transit system that may appear. The strength of the authority is that it will have the control over that contracting system. The problem that we have is, for many years, many of you know, in Fulton and DeKalb, we've been paying an extra penny for MARTA for 30 years. We think MARTA is an important part. It is the core of any transit system. But we don't believe that the state has a role in taking over the MARTA system. We believe that this authority, which will be regional, should be able to contract with whatever transit provider they want to. So that's what this bill does. It creates a system for an authority of 10 county commissioners and mayors to determine what MARTA does, how it coordinates with Cobb, how it coordinates with other transit systems. We all know that transportation investment, this act that we're going to vote on, is critical to the economic development in our state. Probably helped to get Caterpillar here along with the port. I want to say very clearly to you that introducing this bill was not MARTA's bill. It wasn't the ARC's idea. It wasn't the mayor's idea. We believe that this is a better solution that would provide local control for our transit dollars. We think it's the right thing to do, and we believe that it is the right way to do it. I'm going to introduce my colleague from Fulton County, who is a signer along with 6 or 7 others who perhaps are on their way, Representative Kathy Ash.
Thank you, Representative Gardner, and thank you for leading the way and getting us to really provide an alternative look at the way in which transit governance could and should happen. I really think that establishing a regional transit structure and tweaking the MARTA Act to make the transit system more functional should be a no-brainer. There are all sorts of alternatives out there being looked at, and we want to make sure that this bill, 1200, which is really the product of regional leadership, has a place at the table as those decisions are being made. There are 2 important pieces to MARTA that I think just have to happen if we're going to make it work. And the first removes the transit authority's restriction that 50% of its sales tax revenues collected in Atlanta, Fulton, and DeKalb be spent on capital improvements and 50% on operating. MARTA should and must have flexibility on how it spends its revenues. The second real change and real revision that needs to happen is that MARTA needs to be permitted to contract with counties outside of Fulton and DeKalb to provide rail services. When they're ready to develop rail transit, counties should be able to contract with the one transit authority in the region that has the experience in building and operating rail systems. Currently, MARTA does not have the right to contract with other counties to provide services. And of course, as Representative Gardner mentioned, the state does not fund MARTA. MARTA gets most of its funds largely from fares and a special sales tax paid in Fulton and DeKalb. As we talk about and as we've watched the roundtable work on developing the project list for the TIA, we've discovered that folks across this region can work together really well. And what we need to do is to provide the structure for regional governance that allows those local officials to come together and continue to make great decisions, not hampered by restrictions on MARTA, not hampered by folks not involved in the region naming the people who are going to make the decision. I have great faith in the local elected officials across this region. I think those elected officials recognize the connectivity. Roads, trains, buses don't stop at county lines. They drive right across them. And as we are governing transit, we need to make sure that our region does it in a way where local folks are making decisions for local transit. So I will wear my button until the 31st of July when I proudly cast a yes vote, just like I did on water today. But I will feel better about casting that yes vote if we have in place a governance structure that works for the decisions that have been made so far. We just need to take it that next step. And that's what House Bill 1200 does.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Who could have said it better? We have a couple people here who are strongly supportive of this legislation who would like to say a word or two. We'll start with Chuck Ware, not with AARP, but with Georgians. Stand up for Georgians. Stand up for seniors. I'll get it right.
And I am one, so thank you for being here.
We all are.
Good morning, everybody. Well, like she said, it's very important that we get this bill through. But here's the ingredients of this. One senator introduced the broth for the soup. Another senator introduced the peas. They put the peas and all the carrots in it, but it's still popping up. Representative Gardner introduced the main ingredients to keep soup together, and that's okra. Okra is slimy enough to keep everything together. And this is what we got to do. We got to stick together and start working on this bill because it's so important. People just don't. I've been all over the county talking on the bill, and I've got some good response for it. But once something dies, it's dead. So you got to talk it up. People got so much on their mind now they just can't remember everything. So remember, keep the okra in the pot, and we'll get what we got. Thank you. Okay.
I've been called a lot of things, but never slimy before. But if that's what it takes to make the soup, I'm with you. I think Chuck's identified the problem that we have. We talk to people about how important the TIA is for us, and they say, well, does it help MARTA? Does it take the 50-50 away from MARTA? And when I try to explain to them how that could happen in the future, they have 30 years of history suggesting that probably is a difficult problem. So we're here to talk about local control, as Kathy has so eloquently put it. It's just difficult to talk about how important this is without an understanding that there will be recognition of MARTA and the other transit systems as core providers in our system. We have the Georgia Regional Business Council representative who is also a supporter of ours.
Thank you, Representative Gardner. My name is Terry Lawler, and I'm the Executive Director of the Regional Business Coalition of Metropolitan Atlanta, which is an association of over a dozen local chambers of commerce employing more than, with 15,000 businesses, employing more than 1 million Metro Atlanta residents. And I want to make a couple of comments here today, and I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to do that. And I hope you don't mind if I will read these so I get this information correct. The RBC commends Representative Gardner for her support of regional transit governance, and in particular, the introduction of House Bill 1200. Significant portions of House Bill 1200 are the culmination of years of work by the Atlanta Regional Commission, their Regional Transit Committee, to address transit governance in the metropolitan Atlanta region. This work, as well as the efforts of the Governor's Task Force for Transit Governance and their submission of drafts for legislation, shows a commitment to investing in Metro Atlanta's transit systems. We strongly agree with Representative Gardner, where she says in House Bill 1200 that mass transit improves the mobility of the public and provides access to jobs, commercial facilities, schools, medical institutions, and cultural attractions while decreasing air pollution and other environmental hazards and promoting physical well-being. Representative Gardner further states by saying that mass transit is essential to economic well-being, congestion mitigation, environmental preservation, maintenance of full employment, conservation of energy, and land use optimization. We couldn't agree more with her. Today, transit services are offered in Metro Atlanta counties whose land area is almost 3 times the size of the state of Rhode Island. Every day, hundreds of thousands of cars are removed from Metro Atlanta highways as our transit systems provide commuters with almost 500,000 customer trips daily throughout the region. With the public support of the transportation referendum this July, over $3 billion will be invested in transit services over the next decade. Metro Atlanta residents and visitors will benefit from increased investments in transit services offered through bus rapid transit, mobility coordination services, construction of the Beltline and the Clifton Corridor, express bus service upgrades, the operation of a Clayton County transit system, and many, many other transit and highway investments throughout the Metro Atlanta region. How these transit services and systems interconnect efficiently and effectively underscores the importance of transit governance. It took years of public input to get the Transportation Investment Act right. Transit governance is no less important, and we should take whatever time is necessary to get it right too. Language in House Bill 1200 is an important step towards resolving transit governance issues. Again, the Regional Business Coalition wants to thank Representative Garner and the other co-sponsors of House Bill 1200, as well as the efforts of the ARC and the Governor's Task Force on Transit Governance, as we continue to work towards providing Metro Atlanta residents with the best transit services possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't know if I mentioned that was Terry Lawler with the business regional. Former representative. We're very proud to have with us today somebody who probably can tell us a lot about the history of MARTA if we had all day. But he's here to support us, and we really appreciate Representative Tyrone Brooks.
Glad to be here.
Would you like to say something?
No.
Oh, well, thank you for being here. We have one other person who wanted to say something, representing all the transit systems in Georgia. Tom Bauer is with the Georgia Transit Association. You may know that the other transit systems are members of this organization. Tom, would you like to say a word or two, and then we'll have some questions.
Thank you, Representative, and you actually used my opening line. I have to say I agree with what Terry said, but I'd much rather follow him than Chuck Ware, so I thank you for that order.
You don't want to be open?
No, I just don't want to be upstaged by Chuck. As Representative Gardner said, I'm Tom Bauer, and I work with the Georgia Transit Association. We're a statewide group with both urban and rural transit providers as members. GTA is pleased to see the introduction of House Bill 1200 because it presents another avenue to discuss the need for regional governance for transit on a statewide basis. GTA has established principles for legislation in this regard, including the coordination of public and human services transportation. We understand there's an ongoing discussion about regional governance for the Atlanta region in particular, and the GTA principles do not specifically address this effort. However, House Bill 1200 also authorizes regional transit authorities outside Atlanta. GTA was invited to present its recommendations to the Governor's Task Force on Transit Governance, and we'd like to reiterate our interest today in regional governance both within and outside the Atlanta area. House Bill 1200 is another opportunity to further that discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you all for being here. We have a few minutes for questions. If anybody has any, I would welcome your questions now or later.
Looking like pretty difficult for anything to pass this session at all. Is there any real impact to the Chiefs-Boss vote as far as you know?
I think we don't know the answer to that. Clearly it is uncertain. The reason it felt so important to introduce this was that I continually talk about the TIA and how important it is to our region, and what I hear from people is, well, I'm already paying a penny, why do I have to pay another penny? And I, in spite of being supportive, in spite of that, I have a hard time explaining to them how MARTA is going to be integrated into the new system. It would be so helpful to have a structure that we already understood would be controlled by local officials, local elected officials from the region that the money comes from. That would include Fulton and DeKalb, but it would include 8 other counties as well who have transit systems and who have contributed to transit. So we wanted them to all be treated fairly. So yes, I think it's important. Do I think it's going to happen this session? We have the 30th day on Wednesday, and as you know, it doesn't look likely. But it's important that we get this out into the public debate so that people understand the importance of local control. And we can always hope that there'll be a way to fix the 50-50 MARTA handcuffs. It's time. It's 30 years old. It may have made sense 30 years ago. We know it doesn't make sense. If you're not paying for MARTA, why should you have control over how it spends its money? Other questions or comments?
I can't resist just saying that I think it's the discussion that's really the important point at this time. I think if we ask folks to go vote in July without their having a sense that there is active, productive discussion and how governance is going to happen, it would be really hard to convince people to vote yes. I think, we're probably not going to get anything finished this session. I think it is a work in progress, but I want people to know that it is a work in progress, that we're not just saying, go vote yes, and then we'll begin to think about how we might govern it. So I think it's the process that's important. And once again, it's beginning that discussion. It's letting people know that there are alternative views of how it might happen, but that those views need to come together at a table and come to consensus. That's what this process is all about. I think this is a willingness to be at the table.
Other questions?
Thanks for being here.
We really appreciate your being here. We hope you help us get the message out. That's why we're here. I have some summaries of the bill over on the table here. Hope you'll take a serious look, and thank you very much. If nothing else, do vote July 31st for the TIA.
And if